Hi, I'm Alison.
And I'm Taylor.
And we're the hosts of the Anxiety Chicks podcast, where we dive deep into the reality of anxiety, nutrition, and mental health.
Listen as we explore all things anxiety healing while keeping it real, including our own struggles with mental health.
We'll bring our expertise as healing professionals to the conversation while discussing the tools and strategies you need to heal the anxious mind.
Listen to the Anxiety Chicks on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Anxiety Chicks podcast. I'm Alison Seponara.
And I'm Taylor. And today we are with a very, very special guest, somebody that I've gone down a rabbit hole of reading information on, learning about, and I was so excited to have her on the podcast. Her name is Dr. Kate Lyzenga-Dean, is a functional medicine consultant with a passion for connecting wellness seekers with cutting-edge lab testing, lifestyle therapies, and evidence-based wellness resources. As the founder of Dr. Kate Functional Medicine, a personalized health consultation company, she is a sought-after speaker, and her information and popular YouTube videos, which I've gone down the rabbit hole of, have over 2 million views on some of her videos. That's insane. You can find her channel at www.youtube.com/Dr. Kate Lyzenga-Dean, and we will have this in the show notes, so don't be like frantically writing right now. She has pursued additional education through the Institute of Functional Medicine. We love an IFM. Always, we'll talk about that in a minute too. And specializes in helping frustrated clients find sources for hormone dysfunction, weight loss resistance, hair loss, low ferritin, gut dysfunction, and more. Dr. Kate, before we get you talking and saying anything, I just want to give you my spiel of how I found you. And so anybody listening, this episode is going to be titled Low Ferritin, High Anxiety, the Connection No One's Talking About. I personally have gone through a journey since everybody knows here that I have anxiety and I've dealt with it. And I've always been like, something else is there. There's something more to this. And as a lot of you know, I just got diagnosed with 2 autoimmune diseases. But on top of that, I have been told since 2018, your ferritin's fine, your ferritin's fine. Well, just till this year, I realized my ferritin has not been fine. It has been within the range of 11 to 18 since 2019. And so I went down a rabbit hole of Dr. Kate's YouTube videos, and I'm realizing that this needs to be talked about and awareness needs to be spread on this because it's not okay. And it can cause symptoms. And Dr. Kate, I've made you sit in silence for long enough. You probably just want to scream information at everybody, but welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I think that the good opener for this would be what got you into what you do, and especially like speaking about things that aren't being spoken about, and like why, like you have so many videos on just the word ferritin. Like I think I found like 6 or 7. And so what got you to where you are and what got you so passionate about these topics?
That's a really good question. You know, I've always been interested in medicine since like 5th grade biology class. And so, and integrative medicine is kind of where it's at in terms of combining all the good things about medicine and sort of discarding some of the stuff that isn't working very well. So my background in medicine is just, you know, that long-term sort of interest, but my specific interest in all things related to stress, anxiety, panic attacks, all of that kind of stuff came about because when I was actually studying to become a doctor, I'm surrounded by doctors at a doctor school, right? I am having unrelenting symptoms that nobody can seem to figure out. So as you know, right, this is a common story for people who end up digging really deep into a topic, especially related to health, is they or someone they love has been suffering with no answers, right? So they're like, well, dang it, I'm going to figure this out. And of course, being at doctor school, I had the best opportunity to figure this out, right? Because I was learning it as I was going through. So that's kind of where my passion started. Now, my symptoms ended up being basically I was having panic attacks without the panic. So I was not having any emotional or mental health related symptoms at all, which was very confusing for everyone, right? Myself included. But I was having all of the physical symptoms. I was having the night sweats. I was having shaking of my hands and feet. I was having extreme nausea. I was having shortness of breath. I was having dizziness. And these things were very chronic. They kind of came on really suddenly. Again, during a very stressful time in my life. But I was kind of, I'm a type A person. I was kind of used to eating stress for breakfast, right? Like I can handle this. And I was handling it mentally and emotionally, but physically my body was like, this is not okay. You're not okay. And how can I tell you this if you're ignoring all of these signs and symptoms? So over the course of months and months and months of digging and trying to figure out and suffering, right? I mean, struggling. I learned a lot about how the stress response system works on a physiologic level and how oftentimes I think we get stuck in the mental and emotional side of stress and including anxiety, and we forget about the physical stuff. And so then, of course, that lends itself to, well, what's causing these physical symptoms? And things like ferritin, low ferritin sort of come up once you start digging through, the data and the research and making these sorts of connections. So very personal for me, on lots of levels.
And that had to be hard for you as somebody who is going to school for these things, and you feel like I should just be able to fix myself. I should know these things. I should be like, all those thoughts probably come to your mind. But this when you were in school, I'm curious, were you being told things like, hey, a ferritin of 11? Okay, see, it's like we have to do our own research. We have to advocate. So many people are told your labs are normal, but like, what is normal for you? What is
Exactly.
your normal? So we've said a lot of words right now, and a lot of people are probably listening to this. I know Allison, when I told her the topic, she was like, what? But let's start with ferritin. I'm passionate about this, guys, and I really hope we can help people through this episode because I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel for myself, and I want other people to feel this way. So let's start with ferritin. What exactly is it, and why is it so important?
Yeah. So I always think of ferritin as one of those they're actually really common labs that are sort of hidden in plain sight, right? Where it's not a weird cutting edge lab to get drawn. In fact, a lot of times it gets ignored. But what ferritin actually is in the body is our backup stash of iron. So it's the bound up iron that's not free floating throughout our bloodstream, because if you get too much free iron in your blood, that can be bad. That can be toxic. So your body basically binds up that stored up iron for when you need it as ferritin. And so measuring ferritin is like looking at your iron reserves. That's a good way to think about it. So if you measure your iron, that's different, right? So some people say to me, well, my iron levels are fine. I'm not anemic, right? My iron levels are even on the top end of normal, but then they look at their backup stash, their reserves of iron as ferritin, and it's super low. And so the body then has to prioritize, really important functions like oxygenating your blood, which is why you can have super low ferritin but still not be anemic, right? It's a prioritization thing, but it might not prioritize stabilizing your moods or maintaining your healthy hair or skin health or some of these other things, right? That can be secondary. So it's one of those measurements, and it's one of those things that, again, just kind of hides underneath these more obvious, I guess, more conventional, if you want to put it that way, priorities, right? When we're talking about medicine, because conventional medicine is about keeping us from dying. It's not necessarily keeping us feeling our best. It's not about optimization. It's not how it's set up. It's not anybody's fault. It's not like your doctor doesn't care. It's just that that's not how the system is set up. At least not now. Hopefully that will change. But
and the issue is with the ranges. For the longest time, I was not made aware because I'm within range. But being an 11 and having the physical symptoms I had, maybe some were anxiety, but maybe my anxiety was being exacerbated from my body really having to work hard because I have a ferritin at 11. And then you get on, when I started doing my research on ferritin and just finding everybody's lived experience, we're more than just a lab test. We're more than just a range. And you really have to, I hate that I had to do all this information myself. And that's why I don't want anyone else to have to deal with this. And I want everybody, if you're listening to this right now, to maybe go look at your past lab works and just see what your ferritin is. Just get a simple ferritin test. It is so easy. Like you said, it's basically involved, like Allison was like, I've never heard of ferritin. I'm like, it's truly on, like, anytime you go get a physical and they pull your lab work, it's probably on there. It's pretty simple test. It's not like you're asking for a $500 lab work add-on. You're just asking for a simple test. And so, yeah, start there. Next question. How can low ferritin mimic anxiety symptoms?
Yeah, so it definitely can mimic those symptoms because the symptoms of low ferritin and the symptoms of anxiety do overlap. So things like energy fluctuations, whether that's fatigue or like spikes and crashes of energy, that can be a really common symptom. Dizziness or feeling lightheaded, that's also a common symptom of anxiety. Heart palpitations, this is a big one. Heart palpitations can be caused by low ferritin alone, right? So it's not only can low ferritin on its own cause these symptoms, but it can then trigger anxiety and feed anxiety symptoms more, right? Because you're experiencing heart palpitations. You're like, what is going on? Why am I feeling like this? And then that can spike adrenaline and other stress hormones, which we'll get to in a second, and actually create more anxiety. So it not only can cause the symptoms itself, but it then triggers more anxiety symptoms. So that's one way that if we're talking about mimicking, right, of ferritin mimicking anxiety, that would be one way. But then ferritin also can cause anxiety, like be an actual root cause of anxiety through a couple different mechanisms. So one of the mechanisms that it can use is by interfering with your body's ability to make thyroid hormone and to convert thyroid hormone from its inactive form to its active form. So that's a whole other conversation about how that actually happens, but it can cause something called subclinical hypothyroid. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but it basically means your TSH number might be perfectly normal. The screening lab that most conventional doctors will do for thyroid problems to check to see if you're hypothyroid is called thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH. And you can have perfectly normal TSHs and still be low in active thyroid hormone, which means you can be below the clinical threshold, like the definition of hypothyroid, but still have all of the symptoms and technically be low in your thyroid function. And again, that can be because of low ferritin, because you're not able to make what you need because you don't have enough stored iron. And then the second way that we know that low ferritin can actively cause anxiety is by slowing down something called the cortisol clearance rate. So reversing just a quick second. Cortisol is one of your chronic stress hormones. It's made by your adrenal glands, secondary to stress. And if you get a lot of cortisol, free cortisol specifically in your bloodstream, it can cause anxiety. So it can cause all the same symptoms of anxiety because of that elevation in free cortisol. It's a stress hormone. It's like fight or flight response, right? If that gets too high. And if your body is unable to clear that excess free cortisol out of your bloodstream through your urine, right? This is a normal process your body can use to sort of modulate how much free cortisol is in your blood at a given time. Low ferritin can make it hard, can slow down that clearance process, so you basically get backed up with cortisol. And that's something that we can measure actually using dried urine hormone testing, which we can talk about too if you want to get into that. Those are kind of the main three things that I think about when I'm connecting something like low ferritin to anxiety symptoms: the mimicking, the triggering, the thyroid, and cortisol clearance.
This is why I wanted you on here, because I'm serious. I believe in life we have to go through things, and sometimes we have to go through things because it's our story to like advocate and share. And I always believe in everything I go through, I want to share it because there's somebody else who's going through this too. And I don't believe that there isn't a reason I'm going through autoimmune disease. There isn't a reason I'm finding these labs, because I think that there's a couple things out there that really need to be checked and looked into before somebody is just wrote off as anxious and anxiety, because I truly believe there are like you said, it kept the hamster wheel going for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, when you feel heart palpitations, you're gonna feel anxious. That is a very uncomfortable feeling. But
Mm-hmm.
what if there was a way that we could find something that could maybe help stop the loop a little bit and give you a little bit of peace? Not saying you might not naturally struggle with perfectionism, you might naturally struggle with high functioning anxiety, but the way that we could maybe lessen these symptoms and the way we feel, I believe we need to advocate for certain things, and especially in women who just feel like they're insane and they keep getting told by doctor and doctor, your labs are fine, your labs are fine, you're fine, you just have anxiety. I believe so hardly in anxiety, but I also believe in there's ways we can feel more comfortable in our body. We don't have to suffer, we don't have to pull out clumps of our hair in the shower, and we don't have to be fatigued all the time. And so yeah, back to the topic. Allison, where are you at in this right now?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm sorry. So this is something that when we get our like typical like yearly blood work done, that it will just be on our blood work, or we have to ask for it.
Recommend asking because
Okay.
it just depends. Like, unfortunately, there isn't a good standard because, insurance companies decide what you do and don't get at this point. But it's certainly something that's well within your regular doctor's scope to draw. It would not raise eyebrows for you to ask for an iron and a ferritin, but you should ask for it.
Okay.
It's also very easy to get your own labs drawn these days. And that's something that I help people with all the time. And it's not expensive. Like Taylor
No.
said, it's certainly not
Yeah.
$500. It might not even be
It's like
$40.
5. Ferritin is like 5 to 10 or something. Like
So,
super cheap.
so yeah, so that would be also an option too that
Hmm.
that's something we help folks with all the time is to get some of these labs that either their doctor is saying aren't necessary or aren't covered by their insurance. And so it's cheaper to actually get them themselves. Um, Ferritin would fall into that category, thyroid panel sometimes too, again, because if they don't have a TSH that's outside the range, then they don't like to draw the rest of the labs.
Right.
But you can order those yourself as well.
Okay.
So, maybe we can include, information about that or my website or something where people can find that
Yeah.
information too. But yes,
Yeah, that would be awesome.
it's a super standard lab.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, that's what came into my mind when you were talking about this. Like, why would I have never like why would this just have never come up, with my yearly
Well,
physicals or all the
Allison,
doctors I've been to? I mean, I've been to literally I've gotten blood drawn like I can't even tell you how many times for different
I believe
things.
it. Yeah.
hang on though. You might have had a ferritin drawn because I have always my primary care doctor, simple doctor, she just adds on for women who have a menstrual cycle. She loves adding on a thyroid panel and an iron panel. However, I've always been in range. But that's actually my next question for you, Dr. Kate,
Yeah.
is what let's talk about range. Let's
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about optimal, and let's talk about the range that's actually provided to everyday people. It's like what, like 10 to 150 is within
I
range?
think that's right for females.
Yeah.
I think 150 is the top number. And it's either 9 or 10. I think it depends on the lab, but you can tell right away that a lab that or like a range that giant, you shouldn't trust a range that giant. I say the same thing about vitamin D. You should not trust a giant range like that. We want to be in the upper portion of those ranges for things like micronutrients, anything that is an ingredient that your body needs to do stuff. Whether that's B vitamins, vitamin D, magnesium, right? All of this stuff we're always trying to optimize. So my optimal range for females is 70 to 150 nanograms per milliliter. For men,
Mind
it's
you guys, I'm
70 to
11 to
300.
15.
Yeah. Yeah.
11.
I hear from people who are 4. And it's and let's be, I mean, this is not to scare anybody, but if you maintain that low of a ferritin, if you maintain that low of an iron reserve, you are putting yourself at risk for other health problems.
Yep.
It's possible to have secondary issues from that. It's hard on your heart to not have enough iron. And so all that to say, that's my range. If females are dealing with thyroid issues, sometimes I'll bump that up to 100 to 150 just to ensure that we're not flirting with anything lower than we need to be. But for most people, that's the range where they feel the best, is if they can get into that 60 to 70 to 80 range for women.
Can I just ask something real quick? Is that something that you sort of like that would be so Taylor like just found that out now. Has she had that range throughout her whole life or does it go up and down? Like is there reasons why it might fluctuate like any other deficiencies? Okay. Okay.
100%. We can totally talk about why,
Yeah, we'll get into
ferritin
that.
might be
Okay.
low. Do you
Okay.
want to do that now or later? It's up
No,
to you
no.
too.
One question.
Sorry.
One question
Right.
before we get into that. Why are women, especially us women who are the perfectionists, the type A, the ones who just like you said, we eat stress for breakfast.
Yeah.
Why are we more prone to low ferritin?
So a couple reasons for that. The first being menstruation. So the fact that we have a period, or most people have some sort of bleeding, most women have some sort of bleeding once a month, and some women have heavy bleeding that they are taught is normal, which it is not. But right, we lose a lot of iron. We lose a lot every month. And so, because we're not small men, even though science sometimes likes to treat us like small men, that's not taken into account. Okay. So, we are constantly through our menstrual years, through our, the years that we are having a cycle, we are constantly having to replenish those levels of iron. And it's not easy. Absorption rates for iron, we can talk about this in a second, but they're just low. It's hard to absorb a lot of iron. That is intentional because iron toxicity is a thing. So your body doesn't want to overload you, right? But it also then means that there are anything that sort of gets in your way of that restocking, I'm going to say, of ferritin can be a problem. So there's that thing. The other thing is that stress, chronic stress, especially the kind of chronic stress that maybe is physical, not mental or emotional, right? So that's the other thing. Even if you're handling everything just fine mentally or emotionally, maybe you're like me where all of your stress is physical and that's all the stress response. When we are in fight or flight response, when we are chronically stressed, it messes up our digestion. And so it can make us secrete less digestive enzymes, which makes it hard for us to absorb iron, can mess with our gut bacterial balance, which can make it hard to absorb iron, can mess with other micronutrients, which can make it hard to absorb. So you've got, number one, you're losing blood every month, you're losing iron. And then because of stress, because you're stuck in fight or flight, you're not absorbing as much iron. Again, there's other things that we can talk about that block absorption, but stress is definitely one of them. And so I think that the combination of those two things can just sorely chip away at our iron reserves so that by the time we hit our late 30s, 40s, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah. And I think another thing is a lot of people they go online or they read research and they're like, oh my gosh, my ferritin's 11, let me pop this iron pill from the store. And it's like, whoa, 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 okay, hang on, let's breathe. Because I've also read, and tell me if I'm right, if I just go and take an iron pill, my iron might go up but my ferritin might not move at all. It all depends on, don't you want to first kind of say, hey, let's see if there's any root causes as to why we're not even absorbing ferritin? And if so, what root causes should people look for? Just,
For
yeah,
sure.
starting
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. So I always put these into three categories. So absorption is one of them, right? The second category is you're losing more iron than you think. So that might be menstruation, but it also could be overtraining. So maybe you're lifting more than you should, or you're running marathons or that sort of thing. That can cause you to lose iron because you destroy red blood cells and you don't replace that as much as because you're not thinking about it, right? You just don't know. The other one can be gastrointestinal bleeding. So people who have IBS, they have ulcers, which is something that can happen from stress, or they have inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Sometimes you can have slow bleeding, not enough where you would see anything, right, in your bowel movements, but enough where you're just losing a little extra iron sort of all the time and you get behind, right? So iron absorption is one, iron loss is one. And then sometimes it's just a matter of not eating enough foods that have iron in them. Standard American diet is very iron poor. And so if we're not getting enough of those dark leafy greens, if we're not getting enough of those, the super iron rich foods that are kind of hard to absorb and digest anyway, as a sort of double whammy, which is super unfair. But, most people have all three of those things going on that then sort of gang up on you, I guess is a good way to put it, to end up with low ferritin.
Yeah, because there's people who could literally take just some iron pill and they get their lab test done, say 3 months from now, and they're like, nothing has budged. So I guess if somebody was going to come to you and say, hey, my ferritin's low, I have these symptoms, what would you do next with that person?
Yeah, so I think an assessment of the gut would be really helpful. There's a couple other things that can, I hinted at that can mess with absorption of iron. One of them is H. pylori. H. pylori is a really common, like 60% or something of the population has H. pylori in their gut. And what it does is it shifts the acid base balance, like pH, we call it, of your gut, and makes it harder to absorb iron. So iron absorption rates are already super low. I mentioned sometimes, like for non-heme iron, so for iron that comes from not animal sources, it can be as low as 2%. So that's why a lot of people, when they're taking these iron supplements, they're taking something random from the drug food store that's not necessarily the highest absorbed form. So that does make a difference. It's making them sick because they're taking so much of it because they're like, well, more is better, right? And so I'm really low, so I really need to get this up. So they're getting digestive distress. And then on top of that, they're only absorbing 2% of it? I mean, you're never going to catch up like that. So I think assessing absorption would be, what are the roadblocks, right, in your path? Do you have H. pylori? Are you making enough stomach acid? Do you have chronic inflammation in your gut that's making it hard for you to absorb things? That would be one step that I would recommend. Another step would be take a cold, hard look at your diet. Make sure that you are getting, not just animal based, but a good variety of iron in your diet throughout the day and daily, right? It has to be something that you have to really be intentional about. So looking at that. And then if you do have heavy menstruation, right? If you're someone who does have a lot of clotting, a lot of cramping, if your flow is heavy or long, if you tend to get a lot of cycles, right? Your cycle is shorter, so you're getting your period more often. Perhaps look at the root cause of that, right? Figure out why you're losing more iron than you should. See what you can do to measure and balance your hormones, starting there, so that you're also not just draining yourself dry, all the time. Obviously, I have suggestions for, the best form of iron for making that more absorbable. One way that you can do it is to take a high potency vitamin C when you take iron, because it helps just increase absorption just a notch. But sometimes that's enough, right? It's not increasing it from 2 to 50, but even if you increase by 5% or 10% your absorption, that's a lot when it comes to iron. There are certain bacteria, helpful bugs, right, that you can take in probiotic form. Lactobacillus plantarum is one that comes to mind, that have shown to be able to increase iron absorption. So, get rid of that H. pylori and maybe replenish with some of these other more helpful bugs. All of that kind of stuff is usually, what we're working on if I'm working with a client or if I'm making recommendations for, really looking at it from a root cause perspective instead of just going, here's an iron pill from Walgreens.
Well, I think that the biggest issue with that is then people take the iron pill just blindly, like you said. Next thing you know, they are so constipated, they're not even using the restroom anymore. And also, on top of that, learning how many different forms of iron there are to take. And it's just like, okay, whoa, 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 that's so overwhelming. And that's what led me to actually like doing research and doing your videos, is because really going to the store and just grabbing an iron pill, like you said, a lot of these people, our iron's fine, our iron levels are fine, saturation percentage is fine, everything's fine except for this ferritin number. And so I don't believe that the first step would be just going to the store and buying an iron pill.
Yeah, I think low and slow, right? Because iron levels definitely fluctuate day to day, week to week. So if you took if you're talking about free iron in your blood, right? That could be very different in the morning than the afternoon. So again, take some of those labs with a grain of salt, right? If you've done, every 3 months for a little while, right? And you're seeing some consistency with the numbers, or if you're like, every time I go get my lab, it's at 8 a.m., right? To just try to maintain some consistency with those sorts of labs, they can be more useful. But remember, your body is going to prioritize having enough free iron in the blood. So it's going to be constantly regulating, taking out of that sort of ferritin backup stash. So yes, I usually, again, once we kind of get some of the roadblocks out of the way, if that alone is not enough, which it usually isn't, especially if someone's quite low, then getting somebody on a really high quality, high absorbable iron is a good idea, even if your iron levels look okay, because your ferritin levels are still low. If you truly get to the point of iron overload, which is incredibly rare, there are diseases that is the case, and you do have to know that you're deficient before you start taking iron. You don't want to just take it because you've got anxiety. You want to know what your iron and ferritin levels are before you start taking iron. But if your ferritin is low, especially if it's actually low, like outside of the normal range, you're going to need some sort of supplemental iron. You just got to make sure you choose the right one and you monitor your levels, which again, I mean, it's like I said, it's low and slow. So that doesn't mean you have to get a blood draw to check it every month. It's more like every 6 months to, make sure you're making progress.
Can I just ask you to clarify one thing? You talk
Yeah.
about H. pylori.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who might not know what that is, or could you just explain a little bit more about what that is? And also, if someone wanted to maybe get to the root cause of their own, if they have it, or like what would be the process of going
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
that?
Of course. So H. pylori is a bacteria that lives in the gut. It was made famous by a physician who insisted that H. pylori caused stomach ulcers. And all of his colleagues said, no, 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 it doesn't. It doesn't. While this guy, brave man, like many scientists do, took an entire vial of H. pylori and drank it to infect himself with H. pylori. And then when he developed stomach ulcers, he was
Crazy.
like, see, this is what I'm talking about. And isn't that so funny? Anyway, so I always remember that story about H. pylori. I can't remember his name. I feel bad about it. But
That's
H.
crazy.
His name should be Mr. H. Pylori.
It should
Only,
be.
sorry, but only a scientist would do that.
That's so
Yeah,
true.
literally. He has no anxiety, clearly.
Desperate times. I mean, if you can't get your colleagues to take you seriously, I mean, you take some drastic steps.
Watch
I guess.
this.
Yeah, watch this.
God, that's funny.
So H. pylori infections are if you were to Google H. pylori, you're gonna see stuff come up about ulcerations in the stomach. But not every strain of H. pylori causes that. There are very mild strains of H. pylori. Like I said, 60% of us have, H. pylori in our gut. If that H. pylori, even if it's not the kind that causes ulcers, right? Even if it's just a different strain, if that gets to be too high, if you get an overgrowth or if those levels start to show up, then we know that it's interrupting your bacterial balance in your gut, your healthy, we call it the microbiome, but the healthy balance of bugs that live inside you that do a lot of good stuff for us. If H. pylori is in the mix, especially if it's high, then we can see problems with digestion, absorption, pH, acid-base balance, digestive enzymes. A lot of gut function can be problematic, and again, cause that malabsorption, the inability to absorb iron like you should. So the way that I recommend testing for H. pylori is a more sensitive test than what your conventional doctor would test. So there is a stool test, which is what you would want to do, right? You check for it in your stool that you can use. The one that I recommend basically takes all of the H. pylori. It's not just looking for them under a microscope. So it could be missed. It's actually, they mash everything up and then they look for the DNA of H. pylori so they can actually quantify it the way that it should be. It's a pretty easy, it's an at-home test kit. It's called the GI map. I can, again, provide information about that, but that's the best way that I found to screen for H. pylori. You won't always have the classic symptoms, right, of heartburn and reflux and stomach pain and all of that you might think. I do find it a lot in patients who have low ferritin. And yeah, so that's how I would, go about looking. And at the same time, that test will tell you about your overall bacterial balance and how much, digestive enzymes you're making and all of that good stuff too. So it's a nice one for that.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that. You know what's so interesting? Like I do know my fair share about H. pylori.
Yeah.
I've never actually tested myself for it yet, but so many of my friends and people I know that have actually tested for it, every single one of them, it always has come back like positive that they have it. Always.
Yeah.
Like they just know.
It's around. Yeah.
I was so bummed to find out I didn't have H. pylori because I was like, this will
Oh,
be my answer. I did
oh
the
yeah.
GI map one, like you said. And like the one part of my test that was just so beautiful was the H. pylori. And I'm like, no parasites and no H. pylori, but hey, low ferritin.
Yeah.
So a few questions that are just coming to my brain as we're talking. Does low ferritin have anything to do with either the development of an autoimmune disease or connection with an autoimmune disease, especially Hashimoto's?
Well, I mean, Hashimoto's, it's certainly going to impact, right? Because when you have Hashimoto's, you already have all of those thyroid antibodies floating around, interfering with your ability to bind active T3 to the receptor, right? So a lot of conventional doctors are like, oh, thyroid antibodies, whatever. Unless they're really high, we're not going to worry about it. Well, they do interfere with your ability to actually have thyroid communication. And so it does matter, what those levels are. They're also an indicator of how active your autoimmunity is, right? Like how much your immune system is making antibodies against yourself. So that's another important thing. But if you already have that going on, and then you have low ferritin on top of that, making it hard for you to make thyroid hormone from an already stressed thyroid, and making it hard for you to convert from inactive to active thyroid, it can certainly potentiate, maybe is a good word to use, and make it worse, trigger worse symptoms if you layer those two on top of each other.
And I think that those two are with mental health, they need to be screened. I don't know why, but it's just like anything with the thyroid, that, and then also low ferritin and low vitamin D have anything to do with each other?
In terms of malabsorption, I mean, if you're not a great absorber, then you're
So if you're
probably
seeing more lower end of a lot of micronutrients, you're then starting to be like, okay, we need to look into absorption.
and
That's what I love what you do. You look at people from a bigger lens than just low ferritin, than just a high TSH. It's like, let's actually get to, that's why it's like, before we supplement, let's actually get to like, hey, if, like what this world we live in, like you said, with standard Americanized diet, most people have leaky gut. It's like cute to have stomach problems nowadays. You know what I mean? Like you get on TikTok or something and you see all these reels and they're like, hot girls have stomach problems. And it's like, when is that? Why is that a thing? Like, first of all, and why do so many women have stomach problems? Like Alison is a hot girl with a stomach problem, but like
No,
we
that is
literally
so
have.
sorry. That's so I'm sorry. Like what? Hot girls have stomach problems. It's just no. I mean,
No,
literally
it
everybody
was a
has.
trend on, it's a trend on
Everybody,
TikTok.
no, I understand. I've seen it, but literally everybody I know has stomach problems. Maybe like two people don't don't have stomach. I actually, I'm thinking
My
of like two
husband
people.
doesn't have stomach problems and he doesn't have
No,
mental health issues. I'm fully convinced that
I mean
stomach
everybody
problems
has mental health
equal
issues too.
something.
But I
Yeah.
will, but I will say, I can name literally, I can think of the people in my brain that don't have certain types of the problems, like whether it's stomach or other like things that overwhelm them. Now they definitely have issues. There's more people I can think of that don't because almost everybody does. I mean, like it's just the education on this. Thank God. I mean, it's becoming more prevalent, like with podcasts like this and help from you and having social media. I mean, we talk about this a lot about how the amazing parts of social media is this type of education because I cannot believe how much we didn't know like even a decade ago.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And I do think it's, in that same vein, people used to have stomach problems, but it was normalized or it wasn't linked to digestion the way that we now understand autoimmunity is linked to the gut and the brain is linked to the
Yeah.
gut, right?
Yeah.
We thought all of our serotonin was made in the brain.
Yeah.
Joke's on us. It's all made in the gut, right? So we didn't know the microbiome existed 50 years ago, right? I mean, maybe a little longer than that, but we certainly didn't know very much about it. So I do
Yeah.
think that, when you say everyone's got this now, it's like, well, we know about it. And so people are recognizing, oh, wait, it's not normal for me to have 8 bowel movements in a day. Like wait a sec.
Right.
Every time that I get nervous, I'm not supposed to have to run to the bathroom or the reverse. I mean, I meet plenty of people with absorption issues who go once a week and they think
Right.
that's normal. And it's
Right.
like, what? No, that's not normal actually. So, and again, stress, the world that we live in, we could have a whole conversation about our environment,
We've
and
had plenty of them. We have like 230.
so we won't rehash that. But the
Yeah.
point is,
We'd love to, obviously.
You're here for the consequences of all this stress.
I love a good rant. I'm here for it. But I do think that your point being, we need to take a different approach to these sorts of issues, to something like anxiety. Yes, we need mental health support. Yes, we need emotional health support. We need to be doing those sorts of things too. And we need to be digging into the physiologic underpinnings, the root cause, like everyone likes to say, but it does describe it really well, of what's actually biochemically happening in your body. And I say this because, like, when I was having my panic attacks without the panic, there was nothing that a therapist was going to say to me because I wasn't anxious. I did not have the emotions of anxiety. I felt fine emotionally and mentally. And so I was forced to reckon with what was happening to me was, yes, secondary distress, but it was all physiologic. And I had to address it physiologically, biochemically. I had to address it on the same level that it was happening. And that's not always the approach that people take, especially if you do have mental and emotional symptoms related to anxiety.
I think that's the hardest part, Dr. Kate. I
Mhm.
think that especially with like for me personally, the dizziness hits home so close to home for me because that is such an unnatural feeling to feel dizzy, and then you go to the cardiologist, you go get blood work done. They said you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. It's anxiety, and you're like, how can anxiety make you feel this bad? But like you said, there could be that component of, yeah, you are having the anxiety, but your ferritin is low and you might be dealing with a little bit more dizziness than you need to be. And it's okay to ask those questions. I think for the longest time I felt shamed into my anxiety, and that you, especially health anxiety, right? Labeled as obsessive, labeled as not accepting a diagnosis. But then I got to this place where like I didn't want to ask any questions and I felt like a burden. And when I really looked into things, I found out I have 2 autoimmune diseases, and I found out I have low ferritin, and I was able to reflect on that and give myself so much grace because, hey, some of these symptoms that even when you don't feel anxious, like you said, I haven't had a panic attack in years, and I don't naturally just feel anxious every day. Why do I still have dizziness? It's those things that just weren't correlating in my brain and made me say, no, you know what? You matter enough to ask these questions. And if somebody wants to treat you poor for asking them, then that's on them. Like you need to advocate for yourself. So if you are listening to this episode and everything is clicking with you, you have been like, I feel this exact same way, I have more questions, and I've been labeled as anxious, find someone like Dr. Kate. And Dr. Kate, you take patients virtually?
Yeah, I do.
Like, just do it for yourself, guys. If you really feel that, like, that conviction within you, that's what I felt. I was like, something, I don't know. Like, I kept looking at these labs and I'm like, I'm not an idiot. Kind of like you said, a range of 11 to 150. Why am I at 11? Like, that doesn't sound too great. And then I listened to podcasts like you and people like you who are putting this information out there and making people say, well, hang on. I want to look into this more. And so if that's you listening to this, go look at your ferritin labs today. Go look at your thyroid labs. Dig deeper if you want to. If you truly feel within you, like, I don't want to struggle with this. I don't want to feel these physical symptoms. And I know that they don't feel right. Go see someone like Dr. Kate. Get to your root cause. You don't have to suffer.
I mean, listen, if you can get your data, if you can get a ferritin lab, right? I mean, you probably can get one without me or without somebody like me, right? Then what is the harm of optimizing your levels, of taking those steps to optimize your levels? You're not doing anything risky by getting your ferritin levels up to the, it's not like you're trying some experimental treatment and just, maybe it will help me. Even if you were at 11 for ferritin and you got your levels up to 65, even if it didn't help your anxiety symptoms, you would still be healthier at the end of the day. You would still have more resilience. You would still be lowering your risk for chronic disease. So, if you happen to have a provider who is poo-pooing this idea of low ferritin having anything to do with your anxiety, you can say, okay, and then go do what you
Thank
need
you.
to
That's what
do
I did. I said, okay,
and
thank you.
get your levels up. And what is the harm? It's only upsides at that point. So
Yeah, I think you actually just made me think of one last question. What's funny is you said the thing about TSH. Well, for the longest
yeah,
time, my doctor was actually saying, no, it's not autoimmune. It's not autoimmune. I think my body is pretty like crazy and insane because it can keep like my iron levels, my TSH levels. I'm really good at like keeping myself within range because our bodies want to stay at this place of homeostasis, right? Like it wants to be there. So it's going to work very hard behind the scenes. So just because our iron levels are normal and just because our TSH is normal, how hard is your body working behind the scenes?
yeah, it's
And that's what I'm learning. It's like, okay, I have a low storage. So my body is clearly working hard to probably keep the iron at iron optimal level. Rather, when someone has a storage, your body's not under that stress of like, hey, we have backup.
yeah, and it's not having to compensate so much. I
Yes.
mean, again, the more we learn about things like genetics and epigenetics, our bodies are constantly compensating for situations, internal situations and external situations that are less than ideal. And it's way easier to do that if you've got the fuel, if you've got the ingredients, right? If you've got everything set up so that you can do this resilience thing, right? Like so you can kind of roll with the punches, it's going to be a lot less stressful on the system.
Yeah, and kind of like you said, our labs are looking for disease, but what about turning on and on, like you said, with the epigenetics? Something you do right now, in 5 years from now, you're preventing yourself from. Like just being at that lower end of your range, like you said, there's no harm. You might not feel perfect. You might still struggle with anxiety, but you might feel a little bit better and you might down the road not have to deal with something else. I just want everybody to have that awareness and have the information because I think we all deserve it. And it's not just freely out there. Like you really got to look into it. Like it was funny even logging on to here before you logged on, Dr. Kate, and Allison and I were sitting here and Allison's like, okay, wait, what's ferritin? And I was like, oh my gosh, like I must be an expert then.
Yeah, no,
Totally.
I mean, I'd never heard of it. I mean, of course I know what iron is and I've heard of that. And so when I saw that, I said, "Oh, okay, it's like where we store our iron, I guess." I am so not a science person, so even if someone has been talking to me about it before, that wasn't my doctor, I probably would be like, "Okay, whatever, don't." But now, when you're actually hearing about it and talking to someone who knows what they're talking about, now I want to learn more. So thank you so much. I think education is just, it's such power. Just having education gives you more power. And also it feels, especially people with anxiety, more education just helps me feel more in control of my body and more in control of like how I can handle things.
Because you are. I mean, that's just the long and short of it, right? Is that you, by looking to optimize this sort of stuff, you are taking control, and that helps on a lot of levels. I agree. And I just think it's important to understand why things are happening. And when you can draw those, or when you can connect those dots, maybe is a good way to put it, between some of these things and what you're feeling, I think that's also a big relief, for folks suffering from anxiety. So I'm a big fan of knowing the why and
Yes.
And I think with ferritin, it's really possible to know that in a way that some other things in health, it's harder. And so to me, it's low hanging fruit. Like, take care of it and see what else you can get.
Thank
I
you so
love that.
much.
Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
I guess just what we had said, like all of this stuff is available to you. We're not talking about thousands of dollars in testing. We're not talking about taking 7 different supplements to get this thing figured out. Like this is the best case for something like functional medicine to work, to really treat something at the root cause and dig into it. And again, I mean, if you've listened to this podcast, you're already 70 steps ahead of where you were before in terms of your ability to actually do something about it. So, and again, too, I would invite anybody who had follow-up questions to head over to my website or chat with these ladies. They've got tons of insights and resources too. Anyone's welcome to email me, and I'll make sure that all of that information, gets to Taylor and Alison so they can share it with everyone who's listening too.
You're so sweet, Dr. Kate. I can just tell you're passionate about helping people. And I love what you said about like, hey, literally getting a ferritin, just checking this one thing. Like we're giving you like this tiny little crumb that you can check into. It's so inexpensive. Anybody can do it. It's like literally getting a Starbucks latte. Why not? And I feel like sometimes we listen to these longevity podcasts or these health podcasts and they're talking about these machines and red lights and all these things. And it's like $5,000 and it's just not relatable. This is literally something you can do today to possibly feel like 10 times better. So why not?
And like you said, it might already be in your My Chart or whatever.
Yeah. Go check your My Chart, check your Quest, check something. What if it's there? And then email Dr. Kate. Like, hopefully your emails don't blow up and everybody has low ferritin. Then
I am okay with it. I am the same as you guys. I just want people to feel better, and I don't want anyone to have to go through what I did. So
you're so sweet.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we'll put everything in the show notes, guys. If you want to see her links, if you're like, hey, I want to learn more about ferritin, she has more videos on YouTube. Go there. Thank you so much for coming on. I was so excited for this episode.
It's my pleasure. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
We hope this episode reminded you that you're not alone and healing is always possible.
If something we shared helped you, the best way to support the show is to leave a review or share this episode with a friend who needs it.
And make sure you're following us on Instagram @TheAnxietyChicks for more support between episodes.
We're just 2 chicks on our own healing journeys, cheering you on every step of the way.
Until next time.
Take a deep breath. You've got this.